There's no sound quite as satisfying to my ears. A sound I'm sure is just as nostalgic to a lot of you watching this video. And every so often I get an itch to replay the classics of my childhood. With games like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, Zelda Minish Cap, and my personal favorite, Pokémon Emerald. The GBA is full of classics I constantly want to revisit, and I'm sure it's the same for people that grew up with the original Game Boy or even DS and 3DS. For most games, this is pretty easy thanks to the Nintendo Switch online service. But for Pokémon? Good luck. Every time a new Nintendo Direct rolls around, fans pray that they'll bring classic 2D Pokémon games to Nintendo Switch, but year after year, we end up disappointed. And with the sometimes ridiculous prices of retro games and consoles that only keep skyrocketing, it feels like the only reliable way to play classic Pokemon games is with emulators. And while emulation has come a long way with even DS games being easily playable on phones nowadays, there's nothing quite like experiencing it just like you did back in the day on the actual Nintendo hardware. So what's a classic Pokemon fan to do if they want to relive the nostalgia of their childhood for a reasonable price? Fly to Japan, duh. Welcome to Akihabara. I am of course joking, but if you ever happen to visit Japan, you might notice that retro video games here aren't nearly as expensive as we've come to expect in the West. And while you'll need a Japanese console or handheld to play some of the region-locked titles, those aren't too pricey either. But if you're just looking to collect, you might be shocked at just how easy to find and affordable some of these hidden gems can be. So join me as we venture to the heart of otaku culture, Akihabara, on the hunt for rare Pokemon games in Japan. Considered by many to be the heart of otaku culture, Akihabara is a must-visit shopping district in Japan if you're into video games, anime, manga, or retro electronics. Although sometimes a bit pricey compared to secondhand shops you might find outside of Tokyo, Akihabara is undeniably the easiest place to find retro games, with literally hundreds of shops dedicated to gaming and anime products. But before we step into Akiba, there's one shop, or rather chain of stores found throughout Japan I need to mention first. With over 800 stores across the country, BOOKOFF is without a doubt the most popular secondhand store in Japan. But today we're going to this particular BOOKOFF because as you can see from the name, it is a super BOOKOFF. And I've had a bit of better luck finding vintage retro games at the super locations, so let's check it out. Despite its name, you'll often find a lot more than just books here. Clothes, kitchen utensils, cameras, music equipment, more clothes, plushies, toys, action figures, and of course, new and used video games.
Gee, they have the days though. There's more the one in the background.
Because they're mainly secondhand stores, that means their stock is limited to whatever people bring in and sell, so it's not always guaranteed you'll find any particular game, but the prices are almost always unbeatable.
But we're looking for Pokemon, and unfortunately I'm not seeing much. I think the only one right there is Fire Red for $3,600.
And although that price isn't bad, I'm mainly looking for box copies of the Game Boy or Game Boy Advance games, which unfortunately this BOOKOFF didn't have. But they did have a lot of the DS Pokemon titles for extremely good prices. Thankfully, this is far from the only BOOKOFF in Japan. In fact, BOOKOFF even has several spin-off stores like HobbyOff, Super BOOKOFF, BOOKOFF BAZAAR, and my personal favorite, HardOff. Okay, maybe it's not my favorite, but the name just cracks me up every time. So if you ever see a BOOKOFF, I would definitely recommend just popping in because you never know what you might find.
Pokemon trading card game for the Game Boy Color, sealed for $1,500. Are you kidding me? Oh, that's pretty sick. Also just noticed this Pokemon Coliseum disc, the Celebi, that's 18,000 yen? Why is that so expensive?
Turns out this is a bonus disc you could only get by pre-ordering Pokemon Coliseum in Japan that would get you Celebi in-game, but this one didn't have the original packaging, so I decided not to get it. Welcome to Akihabara, also known as the Electric Town. You can probably see why. There's quite a lot of electricity around here, a lot of lights, a lot of movement, and a lot of video game stores. So hopefully we have some better luck here and find some of the stuff I'm looking for. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of gaming and just general nerdy culture stores in Akihabara, so I decided to make a list of 10 retro game stores that had the best reviews and recommendations from various websites, so as not to get distracted by the many anime figurine shops. Oh god, he's already in one, isn't he?
Must resist.
I've been collecting Figma ever since I was able to make my own money, so a good smile pop-up shop, come on. But anyway, it's finally time to hit up our first retro game shop, Beep Akihabara. And it's closed.
Not gonna lie, after seeing those BOOKOFF prices, and now the store I most wanted to go to is closed, I'm feeling a little discouraged. But we must go on.
So the second store on my list is Retro Game Camp, which thankfully was open. And playing on the TV right at the entrance was Pokemon Red and Blue. Literally right as you enter, there's a wall lined with pretty much every single Game Boy and Game Boy Advance Pokemon game, and even a few box copies, although the prices are a bit pricey, for lack of a better word. I also found this curious little bit of merch, which I believe is a cloth to clean your Game Boy screen, but the real treasures of this store are hidden up on the second floor. This is where I spotted box copies of Heart Gold and Soul Silver with the Pokewalker, as well as the elusive Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, which I learned in Japan has an even more ridiculous name. Sealed Pokemon Diamond, 3,500. That's not bad. We got Pearl, we got Black and White 2. Oh my god, wait, it goes all the way. I will say it's a little tight in here though. Like, look at this arm space. Barely any arm space here. I won't be revealing what I actually bought until the end of the video, so you'll have to stay tuned. But for now, we're moving on to the third shop, Trader Headquarters. This store is massive, with I believe 5 floors and 2 of them being dedicated to just video games. The other floors are full of figurines from all your favorite shows and other things, but the highlight is definitely the second floor. Here you'll find tons and tons of retro games for pretty much every console, and handhelds in pretty good condition, like these original Game Boy with some unique designs I'd never seen. But as impressive as some of these rarities were, they wouldn't come close to what I felt when I finally saw the Pokemon section.
Yeah, all in here. No way, even Crystal. They literally have them all. They have the whole collection.
As tempting as it was having the holy grail of Pokemon right in front of me, I just couldn't bring myself to buy them for those prices. Some weren't that bad compared to what I'd seen earlier, but Pokemon Green being more than 5 times the price I found it at BOOKOFF just made me feel like I could find a better deal elsewhere. So I reluctantly returned to the first floor where they mainly sell newer games, but that includes DS and 3DS, and this is where I spotted something quite interesting.
What is this? A little Pokemon keyboard? What is this?
This is a game called Learn with Pokemon Typing Adventure, and it was actually never released in the US, so it's no wonder I had no idea what I was looking at. There is an English version of this game, but it only came out in Europe and Australia, so I'd say this is quite a rare find. Overall, I would say Trader Headquarters had the most impressive stock of Pokemon items so far, but when it comes to prices, they tend to lean a bit more towards overpriced, so I would recommend comparing prices online to determine if it's worth it for you.
As tempted as I was, I'm gonna hold off on buying them because I feel like I might be able to find them at another BOOKOFF for a similar price and better quality even, because at least the Pokemon Emerald I found was a little bit scuffed.
But the journey in Akihabara is far from over, and our next stop might just be the most famous retro game store in all of Japan. While most known for their impressive collection of Famicom games, Super Potato has become as much a museum for retro games as it is a store, and a must-visit destination for any gamer visiting Japan, even if you don't plan on buying anything. I knew I was getting close to the shop when nostalgic tunes of gaming's past started humming in the streets, and as I stepped inside the shop's tiny hallway, I was immediately blasted with nostalgic bits of gaming history. There are 3 floors to this Super Potato, with the top one being home to a vintage arcade and a traditional little shop selling Japanese treats. The other 2 floors are chock full of pretty much every type of retro gaming memorabilia you can imagine, and of course, actual games for sale. As far as Pokemon goes though, I wasn't able to spot much that piqued my interest, besides this Pikachu-themed Game Boy Color, but it wasn't actually for sale. And the stuff that could be bought was about as pricey as the previous store. But there were a lot of cool collectibles from other franchises, like this vintage Zelda strategy guide with the most interesting artwork of Link I think I've ever seen, and a ton of unique consoles and handhelds that I was definitely tempted to get even if I had no idea what they're for. But as I mentioned, the highlight of Super Potato is definitely their unique Famicom or NES game collection and the decorations littered throughout the store that give it a vibe you just have to experience in person. So with that, I wrapped up my first night of retro game hunting in Akihabara since the other stores I wanted to visit were closed. Probably shouldn't have come here on a Tuesday. So we're back in Akiba. I really hope Beep is open today. But there's also another BOOKOFF that I want to check out, and there's one more store that I didn't get to go to yesterday. Let's see if we have some good luck. Akihabara during the day is an entirely different vibe, going from a cyberpunk futurescape to something I can only describe as Disney-esque with all the vibrant colors and tourists. But our first stop on this day trip is another huge multi-floor complex known as Mandarake, or Mandrake, I'm not really sure. This building is similar to a few others in Akiba, with each floor being dedicated to a different niche of nerd culture. And of course, video games are all the way up on the 6th floor.
No.
The video game floor boasted an impressive collection of classic games from pretty much every era, including some, I'm assuming, super rare ones considering the price tag. Besides video games though, I noticed this store had an interesting collection of old DVDs.
I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio is very popular in Japan, right?
Oh yeah, they love him here.
Why is he almost $300? I don't know.
But I couldn't spot anything Pokemon. The complex itself definitely gives an 80s vibe, and perhaps even older judging by the displays outside, so maybe Pokemon's just a bit too modern for this place. Which means we're moving on to the next door, and the one I've been most excited for.
Yes, it's open!
Needless to say, I was excited for Beep, and as I stepped inside this retro dungeon, I was not disappointed by its aesthetic, which is definitely helped by the catchy tune that plays throughout the store. Their selection of games wasn't bad either, and particularly noteworthy was their collection of video game soundtracks, which I don't think I'd seen at any previous stores. But of course, I'm on the hunt for Pokemon, and that's when I finally spotted them. This was by far the cheapest I'd seen any boxed Pokemon game. Granted, this was mainly due to the condition of the box, but still, that's pretty good. Though a bit smaller than I expected, Beep was full of so many little details and decorations that made exploring every inch of the store really fun. Definitely recommend checking it out if you're ever in Akihabara. But now it's time to head into what would eventually become perhaps my favorite store in all of Japan, Surugaya. Similar to BOOKOFF, this secondhand store has many locations throughout the country, but specializes more in the sale of figurines, plushies, collectibles, and of course, video games. I first went to the one in Yokohama and was surprised to find one of the rarest Pokemon games ever, just sitting there on the shelf for about $40. If you don't know, the English version of this game easily sells for hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, but I had no idea at the time, so I kinda just left it there. So I'm hoping to find another one here at Surugaya's Akihabara location, where immediately I was drawn to their massive collection of GBA games. The only problem was most of these games were sealed together with another game, and you could only see the side logo, which just says Game Boy Advance, which made it kinda difficult to tell what anything was without actually pulling the case out. So I spent almost an hour looking through each and every one of these GBA containers, hoping that maybe there'd be something rare, when suddenly,
oh, jackpot.
And almost right after that, I spotted Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire for 9,000 yen. And this is when I noticed they had even more GBA games unboxed, but these were bundled with even more games, which made it even harder to find anything specific. Still definitely worth looking through all these, as I actually managed to spot Pokemon Emerald among the chaos. Their DS and 3DS section is also pretty good and thankfully a lot more organized, and I was able to easily find classics like Pokemon Conquest, Pokemon Dash, and Pokemon Art Academy. Man, it's been forever since I played that. Just as I was about ready to head out, something quite peculiar caught my eye. I'd heard of Pokemon Puzzle League on the N64, but had no idea this Game Boy Color puzzle game ever existed. Unfortunately, they only had the box and manual, unless the game was in a different section, but at this point I'd been in the store for over an hour and was in desperate need of some fresh air. But suddenly, the elusive Pokemon box has been spotted again, but as expected it was more expensive than the one in Yokohama. Still, I left Surugaya pretty happy with my other finds and began the journey to the final store on our list. But first, it was time for lunch. Not too far from Akihabara Station, you can find this stall that sells Magikarp Taiyaki, which is a popular fish-shaped Japanese pastry. And boy were they delicious. I believe the shop is called Kuryukan, but you can just Google Magikarp Taiyaki and it should pop up. So if you're a Pokemon fan and happen to be in Akiba, make sure to stop by. And our final stop on this journey is none other than BOOKOFF, specifically the Super Bazaar located in Tokyo Bay. And the reason we're coming all the way out here is because I actually came here once before during my visit to the Tokyo Bay Pokemon Center and found the greatest Pokemon collection of my whole trip.
Look how many copies of Pokemon they have right here. What the heck?
The DS Pokemon games here are definitely the cheapest I've ever seen them, and same goes for the GBA games, at least without the boxes. They even had Pokemon Coliseum for like half the price I bought it at Surugaya, which is a bit of a bummer, but what can you do? You can also find pretty good deals on consoles and handhelds since at least GameCube games are region locked, so you'll need a Japanese one to play Japanese games, but Game Boy and DS games should work just fine. They also had a special cabinet for sealed Pokemon games, and sitting right there was a box copy of the original Pokemon Red for 6,600 yen. But that was 2 weeks ago, and when I returned to see if it was still there...
No. Somebody bought the Pokemon Red, bro. They had Pokemon Red here not that long ago.
To rub salt in the wound, the store has like this announcer on the PA and in English literally said, "If you see something you like, the best time to buy it is now." Yeah, I wish I did that 2 weeks ago. So with that, I wrapped up my Retro Pokemon Game Hunt and head back home feeling a bit defeated about the Pokemon Red situation, but I'm still in Japan for another month and a half, and you can bet I'll be checking in on every single BOOKOFF and Surugaya I see from now on, cause you truly never know what you might find. So here is the final haul. We'll start from the top and just work our way down. So we got this little Kirby game that I mainly bought for my wife just because I thought it was cute. But we found out is actually a rare gyroscope Kirby game, which I didn't even know the Game Boy had. So that's pretty cool. We got Pokemon Green, which was a Japan exclusive. And I've actually been playing through it in Japanese, which has been pretty fun trying to figure out what everything is. Then we have Pokemon Emerald, which had a save file already on it. So let me know if you'd be interested in seeing what that save file had. It could make for an interesting short. Then we have the Pokemon trading card game, video game for the Game Boy, which I just noticed has these weird tapes on it. I might have to open it and find out exactly what those are. But I also found out they made a sequel for this trading card video game that only came out in Japan, so that would be pretty interesting to find. And we have the dynamic duo Pokemon Coliseum and XD for the GameCube. Fun fact, XD might be the only Pokemon RPG I have never played. So, future playthrough / stream. Then we have Super Smash Bros. Melee, which I'm actually not sure why I even bought, but I mean, it does have Pokemon characters in it, so I think it still counts. Then we have a box copy of Pokemon Platinum, which I definitely found for cheaper later on, but it's my favorite Pokemon game of all time, maybe tied with Emerald actually, which is why I'm still looking for a boxed copy of Emerald, but had to get the goats. These two I didn't actually show in the video, but Yokai Watch 1 for Nintendo Switch and Yokai Watch 4, neither of these ever came out in America, so when I saw them, I just had to pick them up, and I'm actually excited to try playing these, even though I don't read Japanese. Then there's this set of Nintendo Hanafuda cards. If you didn't know, this was actually the first product Nintendo ever made. Not literally this one, I'm assuming this is just like a re-release to call back to the nostalgia. But still, pretty cool little piece of history. And last but not least, we've got Pokemon Learn to Type. I'm actually tempted to open this up and play it, but I'm probably not going to. It's just such a relic that must be preserved. Let me know which of these you would have purchased as well, which one's your favorite, and if there's anything else you saw in this video you would have bought. I'm of course still on the hunt for the original Pokemon Red and Blue boxed Japanese copies. You didn't think I forgot about Pokemon Box, did ya? I went back and got it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button if you guys enjoyed and subscribe for more Pokemon content, and I'll catch you in the next video.